congrats on your new-ish job. I know it's not that new, but somewhat.
Thank you.
I'm curious kind of like how the job process was different this time, like since you've been such a brand. Like, I feel like it's, I'm sure last time you were looking for a job, you got into Duolingo. This time, like people know who you are when you apply. And so I'm curious kind of how that changed. Honestly, yeah, like what?
Yeah, I think so. When I was applying and looking, it was very much like, these are my criteria of what I'm going to hit. And if it doesn't hit it, I'm just going to go somewhere else or like just wait. So one of them was like creative freedom. I wanted to be on a team where they were like, you can run with it, because if I didn't have that, I knew I was going to fail. And then 2, like budget. So I was like, our team better have budget for organic social. If that doesn't exist, I'm out. And then also a team. So it wasn't just like a one-person show. So that was like part of that in the background. And then it was, I very much have my own personal brand. I like to write. I will be talking about XYZ, my process, what I go through. And like, the main reason why I even started it was like, I think we as social media managers have like really tough jobs. And it's more of like, how do I provide access and insight into like what I'm doing, and then also learning from other people as well. And like, that has to stay up. And it was part of my contract. It was in my negotiations. And I was like, either you're going to be okay with it or I'm out. And they were okay with it. So here we are.
I know. I feel like one value of having a personal brand is people already have an opinion of you before you apply, I guess.
Yeah.
Which is maybe negative if they don't like your brand, but maybe also positive because you can sort of stand out. I'm curious kind of how you balance your own sort of personal creativity and creative work with the constraints of the brand identity, because I feel like it's sometimes hard to sort of draw those boundaries, and how much is that like brand identity in your mind when you're doing your personal creative work?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly do feel like I'm going through an existential crisis right now of like, what am I without a mascot suit? And like dead ass. Like I was like, who am I? Like, what do I do? And like, it's crazy because the Duolingo account when we first started was like, Zaria's humor. Like that was who I was, and it kind of just became like my alter ego. And so to let go of that and be like, okay, now that I need to like work on a totally new brand, what does that even look like? And I think what's been fun is like putting in mechanisms of like, what is like the general themes that they care about, and how do I like bring in my creativity? So like learning this on the fly as we're going. We're 3 weeks in. DoorDash is huge about being like a 24/7 life assistant. And I'm like, okay, so like how do we bring that to life through social? And I think having just like that general North Star allows me to execute in different ways. And I think there are moments, and I think there's a lot of positive and negative too, but like I think a goal that I had for this role is I actually don't want Zaria's personality to be the DoorDash personality, to have that separation a little bit, because I am my own person. And I always hope we are more than the brands that we work for.
We're more than just a brand.
100%.
What's the biggest creative risk that you've taken, and how did it work out?
Oh, man. I feel like, Duolingo's social presence itself was like a creative risk of the time. I think what's like crazy is reflecting back, there was never a moment where like, I'm pressing a red button, this is a risk. Like I genuinely, first job out of college, I actually didn't understand or know like all the mechanisms of marketing. Like never saw a creative brief, didn't know that there's legal rules, just didn't know. And so I would go and like create something, and then if it went viral, which sometimes it did, it was just like wild to see that come together. So I think like one of the biggest risks we took was like making the mascot suit like do really weird shit, like twerk. Like that just like was unreal at that time. And so I think it was like these small iterations that ended up showing like, wait, if the suit moves this way, then all of a sudden we're getting new users and it's leading to business and investors care. So it was like that cycle, and seeing it through was probably the best payoff.
I'm curious kind of how you think also of like evolving yourself, not like when you are so known for like a single kind of iconic success, like how do you think of your career kind of like evolving from that? And do you feel like increased pressure now? Because I feel like there's so many eyes on you.
Yeah, I think that was actually a really tough part of the transition of like it's normal to leave jobs. Like I'm 27. I'm like, this is like, people go through this. And I think everyone was like, oh my God, like what are you gonna be? And I'm like, damn, if I'm only known for being a twerking bird in my life, fuck me. like genuinely was like, I need to be known for something more than that, because I feel like I'm more than that. So yeah, I think the pressure's on, but I also think like for me, the growth really here is like, how do I step up as a leader and lead this team? And like, evolve new talent to go find the thing that's probably not going to be what I evolved somewhere else. And also I'm kind of in the headspace of like, I'm down to like cash out and cruise. Like if Duo was the thing I was known for, at least I got that in my life. So I was like, it's good to like, if that one thing is there in a defining moment in my career, I'm very happy and okay with that too.
I'm curious, I want to talk about like humor in brand world because it's something that brands sort of want to leverage. You did such a good job of it. But like humor and comedy evolves so much too with like the culture and the context. And how do you think about sort of like developing humor, and what advice do you have for brands that like want to be funny? Because I feel like, you know, a lot of them just do like really bad Twitter jokes and, you know, it's hard to like tap that. And it seems like also brands are working with more comedians.
Yeah, I actually think that that's kind of it. It's like if you want to genuinely lean into humor, you have to find like comedians or people that really kind of encapsulate the humor that you're hoping for, but also know that not every humor needs to be unhinged. And like sometimes I'm like the biggest curse and blessing I brought to this world was unhinged, because it's like unhinged is great, but also it's like if you're not doing it in a witty or smart way, it just becomes annoying and just like it's just going too far to go too far. So I think it's a lot about bringing what you want your brand to be and bringing those people in to create the work for you and like create that content and collaborate with them. And I think there's always going to be an inherent cringeness to being a brand. And I think it's also okay to embrace that a little bit and be like, that is kind of how things are going and how people see brands, and silence brands will continue to be a thing. But like figuring out how you can like keep it at a minimum, I guess, is more of the goal than, you know, not doing it at all.
You mentioned, you know, when you first started Duolingo, like it was so kind of grassroots, and I feel like there was so much, especially early TikTok days, like you could just sort of like post and experiment a lot, and now it feels like the stakes are higher. Everything is getting more narrative. Obviously, like series and scripted series are like a big thing. Like every brand has like a show now, I feel like. And the production quality is high. So how do you, I guess, think brands can kind of like operate and compete in this space when it feels like the bar for production and creativity like keeps getting raised?
I mean, I think the biggest thing is like brands should be investing in organic social. Like that is the number one way to unlock it, is if you have a good team, if you're putting budget towards them, people will experiment and think of things. And I think showing people that not only do you trust them, but you're putting resources into them is what's going to help build the next era. And I don't know what the next era of social is. It's probably coming, and it's probably going to come from someone you least expect it from. And I think just putting that investment in is important. And if that investment can't be there, then understanding also the limitations of like, okay, then like that probably means we're not going to hit these numbers. We're not going to go viral. And like, you should be okay with that too.
I'm trying to think how to ask this, but like being a woman in this space too, and like selling your creative ideas. Because I feel like it's hard, like women are often not taken seriously or even not considered funny or like not, and especially like, you know, being like a woman and a woman of color, like how do you think that has affected? And do you think like wearing the suit was helpful in terms of like how people viewed you?
Yeah. Like me just inside the suit sweating. I feel like honestly, even more than being like a woman, I feel like I struggled with being young in the workplace, where that was like, I'm here, I'm delivering this impact, and like it's literally shaking like investment calls, and like people are like, oh, she's just making a meme, and it's like, how do you translate that work? And it was interesting because when I was leaving Duolingo, I remember I had like one of the last conversations I had, and I was like, I'm gonna be honest, if I did this like 20 years or 15 years into my career, you guys would have made me a VP. You probably would have made me a director, but because I did this so young in my career, I never got that title, right? And I think that's just the reality of any company and how it works. So I think that was like the hardest piece of like, okay, now I'm in a director role and I'm also younger than all of my team that's reporting into me. How do I still show that like, that doesn't really, like obviously a creative idea can come from anywhere, but how do I like extra show up? So like, honestly, a lot of it's like, yeah, I have to be like extra on all the time, being extra strategic, knowing how to communicate, knowing how to articulate what I want. So yeah, I think the hill is higher, but I'm here to pave the way. We're here for Gen Z directors, and I'm excited to like start doing more of that.
Well, it's this like weird thing with like brand social world, because I feel like because there's this idea of like, oh, it's the intern, right? Like people will quote, oh my God, the intern got control of the Twitter account or whatever. And like, I think a lot of people think that this work is done by young people. And in a lot of ways it is, and like really pioneering young people, but also it is a lot of like older people that you have to sell these ideas to. And like, you know, whenever people see those brand posts or something like from McDonald's, you're like, you know, the process of review that it had to go through to get there. So I don't know. I just feel like there's a lot to like navigate within these companies.
Yeah, it's like so much that you just don't realize, and it's crazy because even reflecting back, I was like, oh, 5 years ago, like it was awesome that I had this impact, but damn, I should have spent more time like building my case of like, instead of just going in the corner and filming with a suit and like hitting these hits, like why was I not making decks and presentations and strategizing that? And I think that's like a big thing that I try to tell even my team now is like, I love that you're making the content. It's great that this impact is coming, but unless you know how to talk about it and sell it, like that should be like 30% of your job should be educating. And like as a social manager, that's just the reality for all of us. But developing those skills early on are super important. So like even now at DoorDash, like with my team, I make sure that's part of their professional development, part of what they're doing. So it's never underestimated or just seen. Like a meme is never just a meme. I think it's actually the highest level of craft to think of something witty and sharp in one sentence.
Well, I think also when you're internal at a company, it's like you don't inherently do that. Like if you're at an agency, you got to make the deck for the client. You know what I mean? But I feel like I've done a lot of in-house social for media brands, and like the news is moving so quick. And like you said, you sort of never. Like, I think people in power see the success, but unless you package it and do the sort of like recap of like, hey, this was actually impactful. I think like when you do that, it makes it easier to sell the next, idea.
Yeah, I always say you have to go on those internal PR tours. But I actually think my personal brand helped with that a lot too, because it's like, obviously, like we all have our company Slack channels, Teams channels, whatever. We have all of that, and like it's great to like get visibility there. But if you're able to promote that on like your own LinkedIn or your own impact and write your strategy there, I feel like the external narrative is much stronger and it'll help you way further anyway. And that was kind of like also what encouraged me to end up leaving too, where I was like, actually, I've built this brand. People know what I've done. I've shown that impact. Who gives a crap what the Slack channels are saying? Like, I can go do this and do this again somewhere else, maybe in a different capacity, but like, I also think it's just so important to own your work and vocalize it. And if you can't do it internally, find a place to do it externally, because other people will validate that.
How do you think of like the role of platforms in sort of facilitating creativity? I feel like Duo was so tied with TikTok, obviously, and the sort of the rise of TikTok. Now we're seeing so much, I feel like, growth in streaming, long form content, et cetera. So I guess, can you talk about sort of like developing creative ideas in this like ever shifting platform landscape?
Yeah, I feel like what's helpful is like, I think honing down on one platform that you really want to be on and like doubling down on that, I found to be the most effective way, because there's so much going on that if you just do a little bit on each, like it just kind of gets lost in the sauce. So even when we were like launching Duolingo socials and really figuring it out, the whole thing was like, okay, TikTok is what our focus area was going to be, and like Reels was actually not even a priority for us at the time. Now we're doing more, and they've been doing more, but it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to focus on like all three of these platforms and make sure I have all three like different stuff, because it was also just Zaria for a really long time and I couldn't do that. So I do think a platform actually does really impact like where you go, and doubling down on one is far more effective than trying to like own all 6 of them.
Yeah. Well, I feel like each platform facilitates different formats. Yep. And it's interesting you mentioned Reels. I saw Zuckerberg post yesterday this new slop feed, basically. Like we're all pigs eating our little slop AI feed or whatever. I don't know if brands have a role in that, but like I'm curious like how you think of creativity and creative work also in this age of AI and the slopification of everything.
Yeah, it's weird. I feel like it's really tough because I think being like funny and entertaining is an innately human trait that it's really hard to replicate. And I know everyone keeps talking about taste and all of that, but it's hard because a lot of higher ups are like, well, this is great for content creation. You can get 50x the content instead of filming. And it's like, cool, but have you seen it? Like there's no fingers, there's that going on. So I think the way that I've been trying to approach it is like, okay, if there's this push to do more AI in what we're doing, how do I push that more in the process versus like the ideation? So pretty much doing all like the crap that I don't want to do, and how do I fit that into my creative process? There's actually one GBT bot that I use that I really like, and it's actually, I think it's called like the pusher brief. Somebody else created it, but essentially it like is trained to like push you to think differently and push your creative brief. And that's really helped me like develop insights versus just like surface level insights. So I think that way of like, how am I like almost fighting with this GPT and having a conversation to now go like, okay, I think I'm at a space where I like what I've created, but now I'm gonna actually go and execute. Because I just don't think the world is ready yet for AI execution yet, and I don't think AI is ready for it either.
Well, do you feel like brands that leverage AI can like have a soul to them too? Because it feels like there's this like, I don't know, like there's this anti-AI backlash, but then I also see so much organic creativity, especially from users like making weird characters and things and lore, like the Italian brain rot people or whatever.
Yeah, I feel like brands are soulless, so I feel like adding more soullessness through AI is just like, why? I don't know if that's a hot take, but like that, I think it's really hard for brands to show up with AI, and I think that's exactly it. Like you're seeing like the Apple brain rot, the Shrek brain rot, the little babies talking brain rot. That's like all built through AI, and people are responding to that because it's not coming from a brand. So I think it's also understanding like who you are and what you're saying into the conversation and how what you're creatively outputting affects that is also very much part of a social strategy.
What about the role of algorithms in terms of creativity? Because I feel like so much of, I mean, you're talking about like brainstorming, but I feel like a lot of us, even just anybody that's creative, like you inherently think of how it will perform and you kind of think about the algorithm, I guess, and ultimately you are sort of performing for algorithms increasingly. What do you how do you think about that? Like the decline of sort of organic distribution and this like creating content for just these machines and stuff?
I hate the algorithm. Yeah, it's always a fight. I think what's hard is like, especially like reflecting back at like what happened with Duolingo, like we joined TikTok so early. So then obviously we got algorithmic favor because it was just like first player advantage. So like videos would just blow up way more. And then as more brands got onto the platform, like obviously the viewership goes down, things get oversaturated. I think what's really hard is when you set a standard of overperformance because of something that happened to the algorithm, it's really hard to go backwards and be like, well, it's changing, things are changing, especially to business like heads. So now going into this new role of like, okay, we're pretty much at like zero. Like people don't really know DoorDash's socials yet. But we're gonna like, what's our ebb and flow and what's our way to be okay? Like these are pieces that we're making that are for the algorithm to make the bosses happy. But these are like pieces that are experiments and are creatively fulfilling to like what the team is doing. So I've kind of divvied it out now into like, we're gonna do both, but we're gonna make sure that like we're still feeling creatively fulfilled for things that might not go viral, but like people are excited and they're experimenting, so I think that's just as important. So it's kind of doing a mix of both to make everyone happy.
Just kind of getting back to this theme of like everyone being a creator and like people just creating more and more content. I'm curious how you think of like the changing role of like user generated content, because I feel like everyone's a user, but everyone's a content creator, and so you're also like engaging with people in platforms sometimes that are participating, and you like, how do you sort of like navigate that?
I think UGC is actually like the best thing to happen for brands, because I think now there's more opportunities for us as like social people. Like yes, things live in the feed, but if people already are like existing in these algorithms, how do we take and create these amazing experiences or things outside that people just want to see and go through and then document that? And also like it helps the social team because now many people are making content about what you're doing. So like I actually feel very positive about UGC. I think it's a great way to like give people the experiences they want, allow social to extend beyond the algorithm, and like also get that help of like this content machine being created around you.
Well, I feel like UGC though, it's what I've noticed like interestingly is just like it's the quality of it is going up so much too. And like you can get like real content creators involved in your campaigns, like it can really travel.
Mm-hmm. And it's like, I think the democratization also of these algorithms allows even people who've never done this before all of a sudden like step up and they're like funny and now they're doing really well and they incorporated your brand in some space. Like why not create more opportunities just for people to like create that content for you?
How do you balance like kind of developing your personal brand aside from your professional brand? And I'm curious, like, if you've ever regretted having your personal brand so intertwined with a corporation.
Yes. Yeah, it was a really weird time. Like I remember like my last day at Duo and like quitting, and I was like with one of my friends like in her room, and I like lost it, and I was like, who am I? Like I don't know who I am. Like what am I, like screwed forever? Like did I mess up? And I think like it was really hard because it's like everyone knows me as Zaria from Duolingo, but it's like, what about Zaria Parvez who does so many other things outside of that? And like it's such a niche thing within marketing too, I feel like a lot as well, or like in journalism and in these like more creative fields where people are getting more attached to like their brands. So I think the best thing is like, you know what, it's a capitalistic nature. You write it when how you write it, you get the clout that you need to do, and then you also understand that like career success cannot define your entire life success. So that's what I've been telling myself. We're 3 weeks into telling myself that. I'll update you guys in a year. But it's a blessing and a curse.
Yeah, I feel like it's this like ongoing tension and like leveraging a brand. I was thinking that when I quit the New York Times, I asked this guy, Ben Smith, who's like another journalist who I'd worked with, like, I was like, should I quit? Like, I was getting this other columnist job, which was like way more freedom. And I also wanted to go independent. And I remember Ben Smith was like, oh, definitely quit. He was like, you already got the New York Times brand. He was like, once you've got the brand and you've been there for enough to like milk it, like it's sort of like, your like the value that you get from it sort of starts to decline 100%. And I feel like it sort of like flops. Okay, I was gonna ask the first question, I'll ask the last question. Is creativity dead?
I don't think so. I feel like I've never felt more creatively invigorated than I have in 5 years. Like I feel like there's so much that is on the cusp, and I think when things are on the cusp and they're changing, there's just space to experiment and we're not copying each other. So like my hope is that like experimentation just rises. It's rising within me. So I'm excited. I don't think it's dead.